Hello to everyone. My name is Vaughan Klein. I'm the director of Cisco's collaboration business across Europe, Middle East, Africa and Russia. We've been entertaining you with the Future of Work series. Today we're talking to John Townsend, the CIO of the National Trust. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi Vaughan, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I see you're working from home at the moment, as so many of our customers and all of their employees are. But before we get into how you're utilising the technology and what you're doing around planning for the future of work, I think it'd be really important to give our viewers a bit of a feel for who the National Trust is here in the UK. For those of us in the UK, it's a ubiquity of National Trust. They're such a large organisation and they do so much for the public. But for other people in other parts of the world, they may not know who the National Trust is. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll start with National Trust. Give us a synopsis on who they are and what they do, please.
Sure, Vaughan. So we as the National Trust, we operate in England, we operate in Wales, and we operate in Northern Ireland. We have a sister organisation, National Trust for Scotland. So I know you've been up there recently to have a good look around, and I hope you enjoyed that. If it's okay, I'll share a couple of slides because it might, they say a picture paints 1,000 words. So here we go. Hopefully that'll come through okay.
Coming through right now, John. Thank you. We've got it.
Right, I'll just go to slideshow. So what's the National Trust all about? We protect and care for places so that people and nature can thrive. It's as simple as that. And many millions out there share the belief that nature, beauty and history are for everyone. And I'm a firm believer in that. So we look after the nation's coastline, historic sites, countrysides, green places, ensuring that everybody benefits from that. The nature and the historic environment are really under threat at the minute, and it's essential, for everybody that we look at these things because they enrich people's lives. They're part of the very fabric of our society, and they urgently need more care. Here's some facts and figures about the Trust. We have almost 6 million members. We look after about 250,000 hectares of land, lots of the coastline. We have 6 World Heritage Sites. People know a lot about the big country houses. We look after about 350 of those and welcome visitors back to about 150 of those at the minute. We also have a lot of gardens and parks. Within that, there are a number of museums. There are big art collections. We were getting lots of paying visitors per year. We still have a lot of visitors, but obviously the whole COVID situation has impacted that hugely this year, and that's caused real problems for the Trust and many other heritage organisations around there. We have a huge community of volunteers that provide vital support to the organisation and a fantastic group of staff who enable everything that we do. We're also a big farming organisation that not a lot of people do know that, but we also provide holiday cottages, campsites, which in this era of staycation, are really popular. And we even have pubs and gold mines that we look after. So we're a very broad and varied organisation. And with our staff and volunteers and all of our fantastic supporters out there, we are the biggest conservation charity in Europe. And we think that everybody, and we really believe that everybody can get involved and make a real difference in this area. I'll just take a quick sort of reflection on this year's our 125th anniversary. We're not quite celebrated it in quite the way that we thought we were going to do. Here's a little quote from Octavia Hill, which was one of our 3 founders. And this quote, I believe, sort of spells it all. Our need for quiet, the need for fresh air, the sight of the sky and things growing. These are human needs that are common to all men. I think, we've all sort of felt that a little bit during this whole COVID pandemic and the lockdown. And it's probably truer now than it has ever been in that 125-year history. And I think that whole sense of well-being, that getting back and closer to nature is really important for all of us. And that's not changed. And that's really what we're all about as an organisation.
John, thank you so much. And to your point, I couldn't agree more. I had mentioned we've just had a couple of weeks off as a family. We visited a number of your properties on the way. Having had 5 or 6 months indoors with nothing but electronics, we were on a real quest for some fresh air and some trees and some space and some quiet, and we very much enjoyed the trip right through Wales and Scotland and England, visiting National Trust properties. So thank you very much for you and every one of your staff and all the volunteers for what they do. My personal experience has been tremendous.
Fantastic. Well, great to hear that, Vaughan.
Well, thank you. We'll talk a little bit about future of work now. We'll get to what some of our viewers are really wanting to get down to, which is, what is the future of work? You have a very unique organisation, a very distributed organisation, a very large organisation. And as happenstance would have it, you were preparing for a change in the work styles of your organisation before we entered into all of the turbulence associated with the pandemic. Let's talk about where your mind was at in terms of your planning and the processes that you had started to put in place and the changes that you're making before we all encountered the circumstances that we have for the past 6 months. But I suppose fortuitously, your planning had been proven to be very sound, given all that transpired. So begin the journey for us for your future of work transformation before the pandemic.
Yeah, so this has been going on for us for quite some time. This wasn't the whole idea about how we transform and enable the transformation of the workplace is something we've been putting a lot of thought into for quite some time. And yeah, I agree. Thank goodness we did, because I think at the start of this year, in January, if you were to ask anybody how this year would pan out, nobody did it. The quite terrible events that we've seen around the world. But consequently, I think for us, that preparation that we'd begun a couple of years ago, and we've been working very closely with Cisco in that whole preparation, because it's not just about end user devices and WebEx collaboration tools. There's a much bigger piece to it. For us, it was all about our core infrastructure, how we enabled our places to be connected better. So working with partners to put fiber optic cable even into the ground, because I know we were talking earlier, Vaughan, that some of the challenges around broadband connectivity in the UK are a real problem. And so yeah, we were having to start at that real fundamental foundation layer and build up from there. And we partnered with Cisco to provide our network equipment, working with BT, who are our network provider. And when we put in place, a completely refreshed infrastructure, everything, all our routers, all our network switches, everything, and then even addressed our, the unified core manager at the very core of our network, and thinking about how we provide better telephony services, video conferencing, etc. Because one thing, it's really important to note is that it's not just about home working and remote working. It's also about keeping your workplaces connected with your people, bringing those two things together, because that's where the magic happens. And so enabling things like video conferencing capability throughout our organization, all those 500 sites that we referred to earlier, is that we've got to be able to bring people now who are in that sort of lockdown situation together with those who are actually in the workplace as such. Mm-hmm. So we set out on this journey, as I said, about 3 years ago, and there were probably 3 fundamental driving factors behind that transformation. Now that I reflect on it, and the first of those was that we wanted our people to be enabled to be as effective and productive in delivering that charitable purpose I talked about earlier as they possibly could be. And that meant about giving them the tools to be able to work from wherever they needed to be. And that there's a subtle difference about where they need to be to deliver the outcome that we need. And that's not only wherever they need to be, it's also whenever they need to do that work, and importantly, with whoever they need to do it. Because the Trust doesn't do this stuff all on its own. We partner with a huge number of other charities and commercial organisations to deliver what we do. And so that idea of partnership and collaboration, really, really important. So that was one of the driving factors behind our transformation. The second driving factor is that, quite simply, the National Trust is a conservation charity. We have a very clear target to be carbon net neutral by 2030. And therefore, every single journey that someone undertakes for a work meeting, or many people undertake to come together for a work meeting, has a carbon impact. And therefore, it's only by making journeys that are only absolutely necessary that we're really reducing the impact on the environment and the impact on nature, and therefore contributing to our own strategic goals. And we have a really simple way of communicating that to people, in that we on every single meeting agenda that we publish, we put what's the carbon impact, or in terms of the reduction, and how does that equate to numbers of trees. And it's that easy, and it really just brings it to life. And very, very rough yardstick. One big meeting, it's one tree. Simple as that. And the third driving factor is that we're an organisation that really cares about the well-being of our people, and therefore, if we can reduce their commuting time and improve upon their quality of life by doing so, by enabling when it's appropriate to work from home, why wouldn't we? And because that's clearly, it's a win-win situation. We're getting the best out of our people, and they're getting the best experience from being our people. And those two factors is really important to us. So that was what was driving it.
Thank you very much, John. What great insights on that. And I think, obviously the carbon footprint thing as a conservation organisation, I hadn't considered until you mentioned it, but it makes perfect sense, of course. And what a great benefit to derive from adopting technology that enables people to do so. I think also the comment that I would make is you really had good vision in terms of your long-term planning. I so often talk to customers, and I will give a demonstration of what transpires around their collaboration experience sometimes as their hands go in their heads and they say, oh my gosh, it's the network. But you started a very, very comprehensive planning process through your network refresh, so that when you laid over the collaboration tools, it works seamlessly. And so I think your process and your thinking and the way that you went about the preparation for being able to enable people to work from wherever they needed to work was a really good, well thought out journey by starting from the building blocks and working your way out. Congratulations.
You wouldn't. Yeah, I can say you wouldn't build a house by putting the roof on first, would you? You'd start with the foundations.
Indeed. So look, I suppose that was what you were planning for, and that was what you were executing on. We did wind up in this, pandemic environment, and everybody had to adjust and rethink. Be that a conservation organisation or a banking organisation, everybody was, in this very abrupt moment of, gosh, how are we going to continue to perform our functions, whatever those functions may be? And so what changed, and what more do you see changing as a result of the circumstances in which we found ourselves from where you originally started your planning?
Yes, I think sort of finishing up on the plan, there were some challenges to it. So I want to be clear that this wasn't. We didn't think this was going to be easy, and yes, we had people were really motivated to do this for the reasons I was describing. The change was the changing culture, the ways of working, and all of that. It was a real challenge around user adoption and people thinking differently, because people quite bluntly, people are creatures of habit, and if they've got used to certain ways of working, and you've got managers who are used to having all the team present and sat in front of them, so you know that when everyone's in work and who's doing what. This is a culture that builds up over years and years, Vaughan, and then to actually break that is really challenging, because we all know we are creatures of habit, and we had people who would wanting to travel a lot to conduct those face-to-face meetings, and also, let's be clear, people who were fearful of technology. And they would be very quick to say, oh, the problem with the technology, when actually a lot of the time it was, I don't quite know how to use the technology to its best effect, but I don't want to appear, that I'm the person who doesn't understand it, or I'm fearful of it. And so, user adoption was a real challenge, and that's something when COVID actually really kicked in, it changed. And it changed at a speed that I don't think anyone could have predicted. And
certainly not.
There's a saying, isn't there, that says that necessity is the mother of invention. And I'd
Yes.
temper that slightly, and I'd say that at least it's the driving force for change, if nothing else.
Mm.
And I was absolutely, sort of delighted with the way that our people embraced the change and embraced the technology, along with the rest of the world. Let's be honest, there are grandmothers out there who are doing video calls that had never used it before, to keep in touch with families, and it's great to see. It's really heartening to see. But from our people in the workplace, all of a sudden, it meant that we could just deal with the crisis and not worry about the technology. And we were able to deal with it. I think our chief operating officer said, that we were able to do it with a more finesse and a seamless way than we ever would have dreamt of 12 months earlier, because the technology was there. And so we were able to transition into using it. And that was the big difference with it. That was the big thing that this situation brought, was actually it forced the user adoption, and people got comfortable with it, because they weren't just using it in the workplace, they were using it in their home lives, in their social lives as well.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a big difference. You mentioned grandmothers using it. Of course, here in the UK, we've had, I think, a great grandmother using it. The Queen's been using the WebEx platform for the first time, and we're rather pleased for her selecting our platform. We were filming her being educated on the WebEx platform. I think that made its way through to the media as well. And so, yes, grandmothers, even famous grandmothers, can use the platform.
That's a great royal endorsement there, Vaughan.
Thank you. So so all of a sudden we've got this need. So we changed the cultural aspects. You had a platform in place. You were ready to go. Wound up in a circumstance, and the resistance, the cultural resistance that has around technology, which I think everyone would be nodding their heads as they're watching this particular broadcast right now, would go, yes, we experienced that. And then, well, necessity drove this behavior, and so everybody's now using the platform. So people are thinking about how they use the technology differently. Is there any learnings that you've had now as a distributed workplace? Is there anything about the maintenance of that, the ongoing utilization of that? Now that you have a significantly distributed workplace, with lots of people working from home, what have we learned from that experience?
So I think for us, it's a combination of things here. So we have this concept of a hybrid workplace really now, where we've got people working from home, but we're welcoming public and our supporters back to our places, and so they're open for business. So we've got people working in the more traditional workplace, and we've got people home working or remote working in some way, and so we still got to bring those conversations together. And we sort of I hear a lot of commentary from people about the traditional workplace is a thing of the past. We're never going back to an office and all this. I just don't see that in the long term. Certainly there might be a period of time where people are staying away from offices for certain reasons because of COVID-19 situation. And I think, just to quote Aristotle badly, probably, I think he was, he observed that humans are social creatures by nature, and therefore we need the company of others for our well-being and to thrive. And this, to me, it extends the workplace, how we interact with our colleagues and partners, and therefore that's where when I talk about this hybrid workplace, I think it will involve some time at offices, so we have to be able to maintain those sort of core capabilities around meeting rooms, video conferences, telephony, all of that side of it. But also, this could involve working in other people's offices, the sort of pay-as-you-go model, shared office space, or those of partners that we work alongside. People working from home for a few days a week they're going to need, to be able to sort of get that connectivity into the office environments and all that, so that we have that sort of connected feeling. And it has great benefits, for everyone, both from a productivity perspective, reduction in carbon that I've talked about from travel, commuting, but also people's work well-being. Now, the key thing there, though, is that people will need the tools to be able to do this effectively. so that they can work from anywhere whenever they need to. I mean, I recall just a couple of weeks ago, like you, I was travelling up through Wales into Snowdon, to Snowdonia, and I had a meeting that I really needed to do. So I took a short break from the journey in my camper van. Conducted a WebEx from a car park en route to the mountains, no problem at all. But if and what a great workplace, camper van is. But we also need to think about just not thinking about people just working remotely. We've got to think about as we come out of the crisis into what this new normal looks like, about how we're going to bring the use of meeting rooms so that we can operate more seamlessly between the people in the meeting room on a VC room kit or a WebEx board, and those out using the WebEx application, and how that will then become even more powerful, because people will then be more aware, because of the experience we've gone through in the pandemic, about how they can make sure their colleagues who aren't in the room are properly engaged in a fully engaged and collaborative way. So I think that's going to be an important aspect of it. So we've got to maintain that ability to sort of bring people together.
I talk about this is we can't accept the people that aren't in the room as second-class citizens in a conversation or a meeting or a collaboration session, whatever your purpose is. We need to have that sort of ubiquity of experience that can be generated both in the office and at home, because any one of us can be on either side of that connection now in a hybrid workplace. In some instance, we'll be in the office and our colleagues will be away, and then the situation will reverse. And so we really want to have that ubiquity of experience from a camper van, akin to someone like me standing in front of a WebEx board in the office. We don't want to have any lesser experience based upon the location that we have. So thank you for making that point. It's something certainly we're very focused on, and will continue to be so. Is there anything else in terms of forward-looking, what happens next, what you would like the technology to provide, or is there anything that the National Trust may adapt to in a future of work?
So I think there's a couple of things here, Vaughan, for me. So the first thing about making this technology as inclusive as possible. And for me, this is a really serious point, because we talked earlier about people who have challenges with broadband because they live in rural locations, or they don't have any connectivity, or they're on a mobile phone signal, all of these things. And I think we want to be fully inclusive as a society, and we want to make sure that nobody gets left behind or disadvantaged in this journey to new ways of working, in this sort of global digital transformation that's happening. And so we've got to make sure that the tools we provide can cope with that, and they can operate in these low bandwidth situations as best as possible. And that's a really big point socially for me, that we want to make sure as many people can be in work as possible and have access to the workplace. And therefore, it becomes part of inclusivity to get people to be able to connect and be able to collaborate. So we've got to make sure our collaboration tools are not greedy for bandwidth as best as we can. We've also got to, really think about, as a society, because it's a bigger problem than any one organisation can solve, about how we get good connectivity to those areas that need it most. And for me, that's a key point in providing those people a bridge to working in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My experience on a lower bandwidth has made it difficult during the period of the pandemic. There's no two ways about it. It's interestingly that those deliberations may still take some time. It involves lots of people to come together, including government and private enterprise. And we may not see the speed of the development that we need in order to provide the pipes to everybody in every occasion. Interestingly, from a WebEx perspective, we're releasing product now that can give you high def at half the bandwidth based upon the experience that we've generated. Obviously, not only did it change a lot for the way that everybody works, but it also changed a lot in the way that we prioritize our development. So running high def at half bandwidth was one of the things that we brought into the platform. The other thing that we thought about is, packet loss. How can we give a nice smooth video experience when you're still experiencing 40, 50 or 60% packet loss? Sometimes in my home right now, I get a 90% packet loss ratio, which isn't great. And I'm not sure anybody can help with that, but we're certainly at the point now where at 50 and 60% packet loss, we can still have a smooth video sequence. So we've been thinking about that, at least what we can do within the product. And of course, we welcome and participate in anything that was going to happen in relation to providing sort of internet to good broadband internet to everybody, because this work from home as part of your work style, I think, is here now permanently. I can't see anybody rescinding that to necessarily a full-time approach for all employees. Each employee will work it out, each employer will work it out, but some element of work from home is going to exist within everybody's workplace. I have no doubt about that.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that, Vaughan. And it sounds like you're well placed to do some consumer testing with your own broadband connectivity.
Indeed. Hey,
sorry,
you go.
I was just going to say that there is another part to this as well. I was talking about inclusivity, and that's for people who now have found themselves working this different way with less, face-to-face personal contact with their colleagues, that have challenges that they need to overcome. And I'm thinking here, for people, we've got to be able to support the needs and make the workplace, if it's a virtual workplace, more welcoming, for those individuals. Perhaps they've got some sort of visual impairment or a hearing impairment of some sort, that how we can help them with this technology so they feel as much a part of the workplace in this, sort of not face-to-face sort of way that we found ourselves working.
Yeah, well, good point. Obviously, we're thinking about that sort of transcription service available through one of the acquisitions that we made through Voicea. You can turn that on within your WebEx and get full transcription of your meeting. That can be minutes for people that aren't able to turn up to that meeting. They have a conflict and they're able to catch up on it. And of course, it has the capacity to take some actions and things too. So, I think you're very, very right to say being able to have an inclusive capability as well as a very productive capability within the platform is equally important. Thank you for making that point. I wanted to sort of move on now and have a think about your customers that enjoy the services, the buildings, the experience that the National Trust provides. What do you think needs to happen around what is essentially a workplace that just has lots and lots of visitors? Around what does the National Trust need to do to change, to adapt to the needs of your customers as they come and get the wonderful experiences that you provide?
Yeah, so one of the first things to say is that throughout this whole crisis, that the Trust has been following very closely government guidance as it emerged. Both when we were initially going into lockdown and then as we've slowly emerged from it, and making sure that everything we do is 100% in step with that guidance. And as you know, that is evolving over time because this is a new situation for everybody. And so what's really important for us is that we've got this, two demands, if you like. One of which is that people really want to get back outdoors and engage with the places that we all love. And the other one is we have to make sure we do it in a safe and secure way so that we protect our supporters, our visitors to our places, and we protect our people, our staff and volunteers, and make sure that those two things are never conflicting, and that we do it in a way that makes sure we get as many people, give them the opportunity to come and visit and engage with those places and nature, and but to do it in a way that's measured. And that's what we'll continue to do, because we're going to be with this thing for some time, and we have to make sure that it's sustainable, and certainly we won't want to put our supporters or our people at risk in any way. Another way is sort of that's about getting it ready, but throughout this whole thing, I mentioned before that people have wanted to engage with nature, with the Trust. And one of the ways that we've been innovating and thinking about that is how do we give people those engagement experiences through digital channels? So we've put a lot of content available through our website and our social media channels, so that people can still, get some sort of a flavor of that communion with nature and historic places, even when they haven't been able to visit in person for whatever reason. And I think that's something that, is going to stay with us, because people, say, yes, they want to get out, they want to visit, but there's also that, well, how do I bring nature into me? And you can experience nature in many ways. Digital is one way, but also, people in the gardens through windows, that type of thing, that where they can also sort of experience it.
Well, there it is, the power of video, I suppose, John, in terms of giving a digital experience that people actually feel like they're immersed in all of the properties and things that you have, really important. And look, if I may make a comment about society in general, John, having just done that extensive tour with the family, the social distancing was in place, but in particular, because it's changing all the time, I just noted on behalf of everybody who was involved in sort of the tour around the place, everybody was really patient. There was a lot of understanding by the public. There was a lot of assistance provided by the National Trust staff. Everybody was, aware of the fact that nobody had seen anything like this before, and so therefore not necessarily everything was as smooth as it would be for pre-pandemic. And so therefore patience and understanding exhibited by staff, volunteers, and the people utilising the facilities was apparent everywhere we went. And if there's anything to come by as a society, that sort of patience and understanding as we all go through the machinations of reframing what these experiences may be, I think, is an important one.
I think you're absolutely right there, Vaughan. And I'd add another thing that I think there's been a person really sort of seen that, even whether you're going to the supermarket and queuing up, and that patience, and you say, and understanding, but also it's something that people have been really kind to each other throughout this whole experience, and let's hope that stays with society going forward.
Yeah, I like to think so too. All right, let's start to sort of wrap it up now. Again, just look towards that future. Think about what predictions you may have, for the future in work in general. Be that, what's happening at a CIO level, as what happens next? What are you planning for? Or what happens in perhaps the UKI, or what happens in public service organisations? Just give me some broad perspective on what your predictions for the future of work would be, with that sort of frame of reference.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've opened, Pandora's box as a community, and there is no going back from it. So people have embraced, a digital transformation at a time when they probably thought they were never going to, or it would take years to achieve, and we've done it in a matter of days, weeks, and months. And you can't, we can't put the genie back in the bottle. So this is here to stay with us now. And I think that's the same in people's, home lives, their social lives, and everything. That this technology is now ubiquitous, and it's going to stay with us. How we start to bring that all together with how we collaborate on documents when we're in the workplace, how we partner with other organizations or companies, how we, go to this, be able to do this wherever you are, whenever you choose to, as a working person, more focus on getting the job done rather than necessarily being in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It's going to be a much more an experience. I would predict that people will have the tools they need to do job. They'll have the access to the information that they need in order to get the job done. The recognition that actually it's not the technology, it's the quality of the conversation and the activity that matters. Technology is an enabler. And actually, as we move forward, I think we'll find the technology will become much more seamless, much simpler to use, giving people all the access they need, not just from wherever they need to be, but also on whatever device they choose to join in on as well. That's really important, because people will want to be able to work on their own devices. We've got to be able to make sure we can do that in a safe and secure way when we're talking about in people's information, and we've got to be able to enable it, because that's how we'll get the most out of all of our people. We'll make them, productive through the tools that we'll give them, but it's the opportunity for them to actually interact and do the work, not just within their own teams, but completely across, an organization. So how do we give them visibility about who's working on what? That's one of the next big challenges for me, is you think about how do you create that knowledge management, that sharing of information, so that people can say, oh, hang on, I'm interested in that, or I've been doing some work around that. Share it, so how we give that visibility, because there is a danger as we've got into this sort of a bit more of a lockdown situation, that people sort of they look through a very narrow field of vision and just focus on what they're doing and don't think what's going on to the left and right of them. So how we bring that, and we were, if you think in the introduction of agile working and all these types of things, we were creating town hall events, all of those, and that was daily stand-up routines, etc. Gives you the opportunity to have that shared visibility. I think that's the next thing we've got to crack, is to really think about, well, I've got this thing I'm doing something in, who else is working on it, who else is interested. So that's one of the challenges, I think, of this more distributed hybrid way of working in the future.
Yeah, how do you marshal the collective when it's in so many different places? That's a good point. And look, I wanted to sort of affirm your thinking from our perspective too, that says, we've got a design principle at the moment around a technology which is literally invisible. How do we make it disappear? That actually the function that you perform is the function that you perform, and there isn't a need to think about the technology that you're interfacing with. And your thinking is in that direction as well, where it's just an extension of what we're doing and with whom we're doing it, and it's not actually something that we need to have a gear change to think about. How do I do that? I need to speak to another person. We need to share a document. How do we do that? That all happens naturally, and without any of the gear changing and hard thinking that had needed to be done about how do I do that again? What's the story? Which button do I push? So yes, we feel happiest when in fact the Cisco WebEx isn't actually something that anybody thinks about, and the fact that it's just enabling the work, then we would feel our job's complete. And so we'll join you on that journey, John, and in a distributed and hybridized workforce, and continuing to see if we can make our tools invisible, as strange as that may seem. Look, I wanted to thank you for your time and all of your insights around what the National Trust is going about, both pre and post the COVID environment. I want to thank you for obviously your custom and your support of Cisco, but for all of the viewers today, I'm sure they've learned a great deal about what they need to be thinking about as they start to plan for what do we do when we come out the other side of this moment, and what do we need to plan for. And to your point, start with the foundations and work your way up is a good way to start. Thanks again, John. Very much appreciated.
Gordon, absolute pleasure.
So the National Trust is a conservation charity. We now have over 5.5 million members, more than 500 historical properties throughout England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And we want to bring them all together, and Cisco Collaborative Technologies allow us to do that.
The technology that we had in place really didn't enable ourselves to collaborate as an organisation.
We now today have a central unified comms platform where everyone can contact each other on an internal number, which obviously for us enables free calling, which saves the trust a massive amount of money.
It's important that they have that same seamless experience wherever they are, be they working at home or be they working in partner locations.
Video conferencing is really key for us to help our users not have to travel if they don't need to.
For 9 video meeting, it's actually saved us 1,000 miles of travel, and that equates to carbon cost of 1 tree to the organisation.
With WebEx Teams, it was really critical for us to make sure that we integrate with our existing systems, Office 365, our OneDrive and our SharePoint, to be able to have the ability to share documentation without duplicating it into WebEx Teams.
The control hub is really important for our technical teams to have one central view and dashboard. It's really important from an analytics perspective.
We found with Cisco, and what we looked at specifically, was the integration with the hardware, the VC kit, Microsoft Office 365, and the really good quality video shot. The experience is key to our end users. And when you look at Cisco, that's where they outperform other vendors.
Having that joined up experience to be able to collaborate is a really powerful capability for us, and Cisco collaboration tools enable us to do that.